Imagine a corporate secret so massive and, so heavily regulated that casually discussing it with your own cousin over a Sunday family lunch could literally land your entire family in federal prison.
Yeah, which sounds entirely like a movie plot, but it is a very real, very dangerous scenario.
Right. And today we're taking a deep dive into a 200 billion peso green energy pivot that is, it's basically tearing apart one of the most historically powerful families in the Philippines from the inside out.
Exactly. It's a fascinating look at legacy wealth colliding with modern markets.
So picture this for a second. It's late February, the year's 2026, and we are inside this plush, heavily soundproofed boardroom in Makati. And sitting around this grand table are 7 cousins from the Lopez family.
The Lopez is right. A name everyone knows.
Everyone knows them. Now, usually when you hear about tycoon family boardroom dramas, you might imagine, I don't know, arguments over inheritances or petty personal slights or who gets the corner office.
Right, the usual succession drama.
Exactly. But that is not what is happening here at all. They are arguing over a set of corporate power deals that literally alter the infrastructure of an entire nation.
Because the assets they control are that significant.
Absolutely. So on one side of the table, you have Federico Piqui Lopez. He's the cousin who has been the quiet, steady architect running the group's power and renewables businesses for years.
The guy actually running the engines.
Right. And then on the other side, you have 5 relatives led by Eugenio Gabby Lopez III, which is a name the public has long associated with the ABS-CBN media empire.
Right, the very public cultural face of the family.
Yeah, exactly. And the energy in that room is incredibly tense because Gabby's faction has decided they no longer trust Piqui to lead their family's private holding company, Lopez Inc.
And, the stakes here extend far beyond just typical corporate intrigue. I mean, the decisions being made in that soundproofed room, they dictate how millions of people will actually get their electricity over the next few decades.
Wow.
And they expose this really fundamental fracture in how legacy wealth navigates modern market realities.
And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We're unpacking an incredibly detailed, exclusive investigative report from Rappler. It's written by Lala Raimondo, and it's dated exactly today, April 1st, 2026.
It's a fantastic piece of journalism.
It really is. The piece is titled Exclusive Lopez versus Lopez, the secrecy fight behind the Razon power deals. And for you listening, I really want you to consider this a masterclass.
Oh, absolutely. It touches on so many different areas.
Yeah. Whether you're interested in high-level business strategy or the psychological dynamics of family enterprises, or even if you just want to know how the actual energy grid powering your home right now works,
Sir.
There's something here for you.
It's got engineering, it's got legal drama, family tension, all of it.
All of it. I promise you, by the end of this deep dive, you will understand not just the staggering engineering mechanics of giant water batteries built into mountainsides, but also the incredibly complex legal web that makes sharing a simple business secret with your own family a potential crime.
And the Rappler piece is phenomenal because it takes us way beyond those sterile press releases and, the boring stock market disclosures.
Right, the stuff that puts you to sleep.
Exactly. It drops us right into that friction point where deeply ingrained family loyalty just collides head-on with rigid corporate governance.
But really quickly, before we get into the heavy details, there is a vital piece of context we have to establish regarding the catalyst for this specific boardroom meeting.
Yes, the ABS-CBN factor.
Right. The source text notes that Gabby's side wanted money for ABS-CBN, which, as many know, has been financially struggling since it lost its broadcast franchise in 2020. Now, for you listening, we need to be explicitly clear here.
Very clear.
Our deep dive today is looking strictly at the business, financial, and structural implications outlined in the source material. We're taking absolutely no political sides regarding the government's actions, the regulatory decisions, or the network itself.
Right, we're not touching the politics of it.
Not at all. We are treating the 2020 franchise loss purely as a historical and financial fact that fundamentally changed the Lopez family's balance sheet, because that change is the spark for the boardroom dynamics we're analyzing today.
Yeah, we have to view that event strictly through the lens of corporate finance. I mean, the loss of the franchise was an event that forced a massive recalculation of the family's assets and liabilities.
Right.
And that's entirely separate from the political landscape that created that reality. It's just about the numbers on the page for this discussion.
Okay, let's unpack this timeline because we have to start with that fateful meeting on February 27, 2026 at the Lopez Inc. board.
The one where it all boiled over.
Exactly. The immediate trigger for this whole showdown was, at least on paper, pretty straightforward. The camp, led by Gabby Lopez, wanted Lopez Inc., which is the family mothership, to inject roughly 2 billion pesos of fresh family capital into ABS-CBN.
Right, a bailout, essentially.
Yeah, to rescue or at least stabilize the struggling network.
Yeah.
But Piqui Lopez, who's wearing the hat of president and CEO of Lopez Inc., at this exact time, pushes back.
He says no.
He resists, yeah. He starts questioning the structure of this financial rescue, and more pointedly, he questions who would actually benefit most from it.
And that resistance was the breaking point. Because when you have a family holding company, capital allocation is always the ultimate test of priorities,
Oh,
right?
for sure. Where you put your money is what you care about.
Exactly. And the dispute over this 2 billion peso injection, it did not end in some polite compromise. It ended in a stark, decisive 5-2 vote.
A 5-2 vote.
On February 27, the majority actually voted to remove Piqui as the president and CEO of Lopez Inc., seeking to replace him with Gabby's younger brother, Rafi. Piqui and his brother Benjamin were the 2 dissenting votes.
I mean, just think about that. A 5-2 vote to oust your own cousin from the top seat of the family holding company. That is monumental.
It's huge.
And the fallout was instantaneous. It didn't just stay behind closed doors, it went straight to the courts. Within days, Piqui's camp sought legal intervention.
They didn't just accept the vote.
Nope. By March 11, a Mandaluyong City Regional Trial Court issued a temporary restraining order, or a TRO. And this TRO legally halted any move to implement those February 27 board resolutions.
So it stopped the replacement dead in its tracks.
Completely stopped Rafi from taking over. And that TRO was actually extended exactly to today, April 1st, 2026.
And, the court didn't stop there. They escalated their intervention by issuing a writ of preliminary injunction.
Okay, break that down for us. What does that actually mean?
Right. So for anyone unfamiliar with how these legal maneuvers work in Philippine corporate law, this injunction essentially freezes the conflict in place.
Like hitting the pause button.
Exactly. It not only bars the enforcement of the resolutions removing Piqui, but it explicitly restrains any acts that would replace him as an officer or a director or corporate representative in the various companies where Lopez Inc. exercises voting rights.
So he stays exactly where he is.
Yes. It mandates an absolute maintenance of the status quo while the overarching case is being litigated.
So legally, as of right now, Piqui is still sitting in the president's chair at Lopez Inc. And over at FirstGen, the massive power company he runs, they're putting out public statements saying operations are continuing, business as usual, with no disruption.
Right, projecting absolute stability to the market.
Yeah. But stepping back from the legal jargon for a second, I have to ask the obvious question here. Is this really just a fight over a 2 billion peso bailout for a TV network?
Yeah.
Or is a TV network just the match that lit a room full of gasoline?
Oh, the 2 billion pesos is absolutely just the match. I mean, to understand the sheer volume of gasoline in that room, you have to look at the shifting center of gravity within the entire Lopez empire over the last decade.
Okay, yeah, tell me about that shift.
For a very long time, ABS-CBN was the loud, visible, culturally dominant face of the family. It held immense symbolic power. Everyone knew it.
It was their crown jewel, publicly.
Right. But in terms of sheer economic value, especially post-2020, its footprint has dramatically diminished. The real economic engine, the actual vault holding the family's wealth today, is the power sector.
The quiet side of the business.
Exactly. Specifically, FirstGen and its massive renewables portfolio.
And that makes total sense when you look at the larger timeline of the family's assets. I mean, the Lopezes have sold off or exited so many of their other massive ventures over the years.
They used to have their hands in everything.
Right. They let go of Meralco, Biontel, Mainolad, NLX. What is left at the absolute center of their balance sheet right now are the controlling stakes in First Philippine Holdings, FirstGen, and the Energy Development Corporation.
And that is entirely Piqui's domain.
Exactly. The property side, like Rockwell Land, is pretty small by comparison.
Yeah, the power and renewables businesses, they are the fortress holding the family's economic future. And the core grievance from Gabby's camp is that they feel they are being treated as bystanders in the very fortress that carries their own family name.
They feel left out.
Completely. They argue that Piqui has been radically remodeling this fortress, making massive landscape-altering deals with outside tycoons, and essentially leaving the family holding company totally in the dark.
And to understand just how much gasoline was in that boardroom,
Yeah.
we really have to look at the sheer scale of the deals Peaky was making behind the scenes.
The numbers are staggering.
You're talking about a 200 billion peso pivot. This isn't just like tweaking the business model. This is dismantling and completely rebuilding an energy empire.
A total transformation.
Yeah. Peaky orchestrated 3 massive moves with the tycoon Enrique Razon and his company Prime Infra, and also within the Lopez's own geothermal arm. And Gabby's camp claims they learned about the true scale of these moves, not from their cousin over dinner, but from reading public press releases.
Which is wild for a family that tight-knit. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the strategic logic behind these moves is incredibly profound, even if the internal communication was allegedly lacking.
Okay, let's break down those moves.
Right. If we examine the first major move, it really sets the stage for everything else. Let's look at what they call the gas bridge.
Oh?
In 2025, First Gen agreed to sell a 60% majority stake in its Batangas gas portfolio to Razon's Prime Infrastructure for around 50 billion pesos.
50 billion pesos. And just to be clear for the listener, this portfolio isn't just some side hustle they decided to liquidate. This is their gas workhorse.
This is a huge chunk of their historic revenue.
Right. We're talking about the Santa Rita plant, San Lorenzo, San Gabriel, Avion. I mean, these plants have been the anchor users of the Malampaya gas since the early 2000s, literally turning natural gas into electricity for a massive chunk of Luzon.
They power the grid.
Yeah, and Peaky just sold 60% of it to Razon, keeping 40% and staying on as the operator. So why sell the crown jewel?
Well, you have to look at the impending risk profile of that specific asset.
Okay, what's the risk?
The gas business is inherently capital intensive and highly exposed to the wild swings of global fuel prices, especially now that the Malampaya field is depleting.
Right, they're running out of local gas.
Exactly, and they are relying heavily on imported liquefied natural gas, or LNG, which is subject to global market chaos.
Oh, okay.
But more critically, the anchor customer for these plants is Meralco, and those power supply contracts are operating on borrowed time.
Wait, what do you mean borrowed time?
The Energy Regulatory Commission has only granted interim extensions for those contracts. These are explicit stopgap measures that end in mid-2026.
So let me get this straight. They're holding this massive physical asset, these giant power plants, but the guaranteed customer contracts, the things that actually make the asset valuable and generate cash flow, are essentially expiring in a few months.
Yes, the guaranteed income is about to vanish.
And consumer advocates are already complaining that these LNG-linked contracts are locking consumers into super expensive electricity. So selling 60% to Razon, who, by the way, is a billionaire with incredibly deep pockets, is a brilliant way of offloading the risk.
It's a strategic retreat.
Right. It's taking $50 billion in cash right now before the contracts potentially fall apart or get renegotiated at much worse terms.
It fundamentally shifts the burden, but, in the energy sector, cash sitting still actually loses value. You cannot just hold on to 50 billion pesos in a bank account. You have to deploy it.
You got to reinvest it.
Right. And Peaky didn't just bank the money from the gas sale. He used it as the funding mechanism to buy into an engineering marvel that almost defies belief.
Okay, this is the part I love.
This brings us to the second move, the mountain batteries. First Gen committed roughly 61.9 billion to 75 billion pesos to acquire a 40% stake in Razon's pump storage hydropower projects in Wawa, Rizal, and Hunan, Laguna.
The text literally calls them water batteries. Now, I know you can't bury giant lithium-ion cells in a mountain, so I'm trying to picture this. Are they using the water itself as the storage medium? Like moving the physical weight of the water when energy is cheap?
You have deduced the exact mechanism. It is a brilliant feat of physics using gravitational potential energy.
Okay, explain it to me like I'm 5.
Imagine 2 massive reservoirs of water, okay? One is at the bottom of a mountain and one is at the top.
Right.
On a sunny, windy day, the national power grid is flooded with cheap, excess electricity from solar panels and wind turbines. The grid literally has more power than it needs.
Because you can't really control when the wind blows.
Exactly. So these facilities take that cheap excess electricity to pump millions of gallons of water from the bottom reservoir all the way up the mountain to the top reservoir.
They are basically using electricity to push massive amounts of weight uphill.
Precisely. And then they just hold it there. The water sits at the top of the mountain like a coiled spring. Then, when the sun goes down, the wind stops blowing, and everyone gets home from work and turns on their air conditioners and televisions, the grid suddenly needs massive amounts of power.
And prices spike.
Right. So the facility simply opens the gates at the top reservoir. All that water rushes back down the mountain, spinning giant turbines and generating electricity to feed back into the grid when prices are at their absolute highest.
That is insane.
It is a long-duration battery made entirely of gravity and water.
That is mind-blowing. And the scale of these specific projects mentioned in the Rappler report is massive.
Unprecedented.
Yeah. The Wawa project is a 600-megawatt facility with a 400-hectare reservoir. It can store up to 6,000 megawatt-hours of energy a day. And the Ahunan plant is 1,400 megawatts, literally lifting water 500 meters up the mountainside from Laguna de Bay.
And we are talking about multi-billion peso engineering behemoths.
Right. But I have to imagine tunneling into a mountain and building 400-hectare lakes carries an insane amount of construction risk. Like, what if they hit a fault line?
Oh, the risk is completely commensurate with the scale. If they work, they are the missing puzzle piece that allows the entire Luzon grid to finally transition to renewable energy.
Because they solve the battery problem.
Exactly. They provide the baseload stability that intermittent solar and wind desperately lack. But if the engineering fails, if the geology of the mountain proves unstable, or if the construction faces insurmountable multi-year delays.
Which happens all the time with mega projects.
All the time. If that happens, they become some of the most expensive headaches in corporate history.
And First Gen isn't just buying a finished product here. They are committing over 60 billion pesos in construction equity, drawn in phases over several years. So Peaky took the 50 billion from the gas sale and threw it straight into the mountains.
Essentially, yeah.
But he didn't stop there. This brings us to the third part of the pivot, the geothermal thoroughbred.
Yes, the EDC factor.
Right. The Lopez's Energy Development Corporation, or EDC, operates the world's largest wet steam geothermal field in Leyte, called the Tungonan Complex.
And geothermal energy is incredibly valuable because, unlike solar or wind, it provides clean, always-on baseload power. It is completely unaffected by weather or the time of day.
You're just tapping into a volcano, basically.
You are tapping into the heat of the Earth itself, yeah. But the Tungonan field has been running for over 40 years, and infrastructure degrades.
Pipes rust, wells dry up.
Right. So in January 2026, First Gen confirmed plans to invest up to 100 billion pesos to thoroughly upgrade and expand this complex.
100 billion pesos just for the upgrade. They want to boost the capacity from 637 megawatts to roughly 967 megawatts by 2029. We are talking about drilling new wells, building new plants, installing on-site battery storage.
The analogy the source uses captures the dynamic perfectly. Gas was the reliable workhorse. Geothermal is the old thoroughbred.
Oh, I like that.
And this 100 billion peso investment is an intense, incredibly expensive training regimen designed to prepare that old thoroughbred for another 30-year race.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. It's like finding out your sibling sold the family's reliable old minivan to a neighbor and used the cash to buy into an experimental rocket ship company. And you only found out by reading the neighbor's Facebook post.
That is a very accurate way to frame the cousin's outrage.
Right. Because I am looking at the overall math here, and it is terrifying if you aren't prepared for it. Peaky brought in roughly 50 billion pesos by selling the majority of the gas plants. But he simultaneously committed anywhere from 160 billion to 175 billion pesos to the mountain batteries and the geothermal upgrades over the next few years.
And the net effect of that math is a profound structural transformation of the company's identity and its balance sheet.
Totally different company.
Completely. They are taking a company that traditionally said, we sell gas power to Meralco, and turning it into a company that says, we run massive geothermal fields and own the giant water batteries that stabilize the national grid.
Which sounds great for a clean energy narrative.
It aligns perfectly with it, and it positions them for the future, absolutely. But it transforms First Gen into an incredibly capital-hungry beast.
I need cash constantly.
They have to find, structure, and service an enormous amount of funding over the next decade just to make this reality.
And the upfront cost and the risk of a literal mountain cave-in are terrifying if you weren't consulted before you bought the dynamite.
That captures the emotional and financial shock perfectly. And it encapsulates the exact perspective of the cousins sitting on the Lopez Inc. board.
Because they're the ones holding the bag if it fails.
From their vantage point, they see their historic, reliable gas business, now majority owned by a rival tycoon. They see themselves positioned as junior partners in a brand new, highly complex hydro platform, and they see a geothermal expansion bill that absolutely dwarfs their recent earnings.
And then right at the exact moment he's bleeding cash for the future of the grid, his cousins walk into the boardroom asking for a 2 billion peso lifeline for a struggling TV network.
It's just a massive clash of priorities.
The timing couldn't be worse. You can see exactly why the room exploded. You can see why they felt like mere spectators to their own legacy.
Which leads us directly into the core of the governance clash. The cousins in Gabby's faction are arguing a very fundamental point about corporate architecture and family rights.
Okay, what's their main argument?
If Lopez Inc. is the family mothership, the entity that holds the aggregated wealth and the voting power, then its board is absolutely entitled to early, meaningful briefings on decisions that permanently alter the family's risk profile.
Right. And they define meaningful as more than just reading a public disclosure on the stock exchange website at the exact same time as a retail investor buying 10 shares from their smartphone on a lunch break.
They want to be in the room where it happens.
They want to walk through the options before a deal is signed. They want to ask the hard questions. Why sell 60% of the gas? Why that specific price? Why put this much money into Razon's hydro portfolio instead of building our own from scratch?
Exactly. And they allege that First Gen entered into these massive multi-billion peso transactions without any prior consultation with the holding company.
Nothing at all.
Well, the Rappler report highlights a specific damaging claim. It says that one large transaction was essentially brought to the Lopez Inc. board as a completely done deal, slotted casually under other matters on the agenda.
You have got to be kidding me. Other matters for a 1 billion peso deal.
And given only about an hour of discussion before approval was expected.
Oh, wow.
Some in the family are even questioning the legal validity of that specific board approval, given the lack of deep review.
If that is true, then voting to oust Peaky isn't just an emotional outburst. It's a formal vote of no confidence in his management style.
It's a structural pushback.
And the friction gets even more complicated. The source mentions that Gabby's majority bloc tried to actively audit First Gen's transactions to see what they had missed.
Right, they wanted to see the books.
But when they asked for the documents, Peaky's camp handed them a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. And this NDA supposedly would have prohibited them from using any adverse information they found in the audit to file a complaint or take legal action.
Yes, and the majority bloc flatly refused to sign it. They branded it an opaque management style and a severe breach of proper governance.
I mean, I would refuse to sign that too.
They want an unrestricted audit for the protection of all shareholders, arguing that as the primary owners, they shouldn't be gagged from acting on what they find.
So I have to ask, what is Peaky's actual defense for keeping his own cousins in the dark about a 200 billion peso pivot and then demanding they sign an NDA just to look at the books? Is he just power hungry, or is there a legitimate legal shield he is using here?
Actually, his defense is deeply rooted in the strict regulations of the Philippine Stock Exchange and the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Really? How so?
It centers on a dilemma faced by almost every modern family conglomerate. It is the concept of the two hats.
Okay, lay out the hats for me.
So, Peaky is wearing hat number 1. Chairman and CEO of First Philippine Holdings and First Gen. These are publicly listed companies. They have thousands of public shareholders, pension funds, retail investors, foreign institutions.
Normal people with 401ks, basically.
Right. Under SEC rules, his absolute uncompromising fiduciary duty is to act in the best interests of all those shareholders, not just his family members.
And part of that fiduciary duty involves the strict control of market-moving information.
The rules regarding insider trading are intentionally draconian. When a listed company is negotiating a deal of this magnitude, say selling a 50 billion peso gas asset, only a tiny, legally defined, closely monitored circle of insiders is allowed to know the terms before they are officially disclosed to the public market.
Because if the public finds out First Gen is suddenly getting 50 billion in cash, the stock price is going to shoot up. And if you know that secret before the public does and you quietly buy the stock, you're cheating the system.
Exactly. And the regulators do not care about your family tree.
They don't care if your last name is Lopez.
Not at all. This is where the legal concept of the accidental insider, or the tippy, becomes critical. Let's walk through a hypothetical scenario.
Sure.
If Peaky wears hat number 2 president of the private Lopez Inc., and he decides to give his cousins a detailed early briefing on the Razon negotiations over a Sunday family lunch.
Which is what they want him to do.
Right, but legally, he just transformed every single cousin in that room into an insider.
And why is that specifically dangerous for the cousins? I mean, they're not necessarily going to go day trade on their phones during lunch.
Because if any of those cousins or their spouses or their personal separate holding companies happen to buy or sell shares of First Gen or Lopez Holdings during that negotiation period, the NFZ algorithms will flag it.
Oh, the SEC has algorithms for that.
They absolutely do. It can trigger a massive regulatory investigation. Even if they didn't explicitly trade based on the secret information, the mere possession of the information while trading can be grounds for suspicion.
Wow, that's intense.
The SEC can issue subpoenas, impose ruinous fines, freeze personal bank accounts, and pursue actual criminal charges.
Okay, wow. So Peaky's camp would argue that keeping the circle small wasn't an insult to the family, it was a quarantine.
A protective quarantine, yes.
He was trying to protect the wider family from accidental insider trading liability. By waiting until the deals were formally disclosed to the PSE before briefing the family board, he entirely neutered the regulatory risk.
That is the core of his legal and structural argument. He was prioritizing the strict compliance required by his public company hat over the familial transparency expected by his private company hat.
And what about that NDA for the audit? That seemed pretty shady.
Well, regarding that controversial NDA, his defenders framed that not as opacity, but as a standard, responsible legal mechanism to contain corporate liability while still allowing access to highly sensitive corporate documents.
I'm listening to this, and, it feels like the ultimate Rorschach test of corporate governance.
God, you mean?
I mean, I can see both sides so clearly. Gabby is absolutely right that a controlling family holding company is rendered completely useless-like, reduced to a mere dividend mailbox, if it only learns about life-altering corporate bets via press releases.
It defeats the purpose of a holding company.
Right. But on the flip side, Pikey is entirely right that the era of a patriarch casually whispering market-moving secrets to relatives over coffee is over, and doing so invites catastrophic legal ruin from the SEC.
The laws have changed dramatically.
So for you listening, think about how you balance the demand for transparency from your own family or partners against rigid legal frameworks. Is Peaky using insider trading risk as a genuine legal shield, a real fear of the SEC? Or is it just an incredibly convenient, bulletproof excuse to avoid asking his older cousins for permission to make deals he already decided he wanted to make?
You are touching on the exact ambiguity that makes these conflicts so intractable, because both realities can exist simultaneously.
For sure.
He might genuinely fear the SEC regulations, and he might also deeply appreciate the operational freedom that those regulations inadvertently provide him.
It is a fascinating deadlock. And, the Rappler report points out something incredibly ironic about this whole NDA and secrecy fight.
The historical parallel.
Yes. This is not the first time the Lopez family has weaponized NDAs, strict process and confidentiality to protect their boardroom. In fact, if we rewind the clock, there's a historical parallel that flips this entire script upside down.
What's fascinating here is the corporate muscle memory. To truly understand why the cousins are reacting the way they are today, we really have to revisit one of the most intense, highly publicized corporate dramas in Philippine history.
You're talking about the Meralco Theater siege.
Exactly. The May 2008 Meralco Theater siege.
Okay, let's set the scene for this, for everyone listening, because it reads like a corporate thriller.
It really does.
It's 2008. The Lopez family still firmly controls Meralco, which is the massive electricity distributor for Metro Manila.
Yeah.
But they are facing a hostile, aggressive campaign from an outsider.
Winston Garcia.
Winston Garcia. He's the brash head of the Government Service Insurance System, or the GSIS. He manages the state pension fund, which owns a big chunk of Meralco shares, and he wants control of the board.
And Garcia launched this brilliant, multi-pronged assault wrapped in the very populist language of transparency and consumer protection.
Which plays really well with the public.
It does. He didn't just ask for board seats. He demanded advance copies of Meralco's audited financial statements days before the actual board meetings.
Mold.
He demanded free, unfettered access to pore over the highly complex power supply contracts between Meralco and the generation companies that the Lopezes themselves own.
Basically looking for dirt.
Exactly. He even demanded to see the detailed insurance arrangements for Meralco's physical assets.
And when the Lopezes didn't just, hand over a massive stack of sensitive folders to a hostile rival, Garcia went straight to the press.
Naturally.
He complained he was being stonewalled. He loudly accused the Lopezes of lacking transparency and strongly hinted they were using Meralco to favor their own power plants at the expense of everyday consumers paying their monthly electric bills.
A very damaging accusation.
Right. So how did the Lopez family, unified back in 2008, respond to this aggressive demand for total transparency?
They systematically stonewalled him, but they did it through rigorous, impenetrable corporate procedure.
Weaponized bureaucracy.
Yes, they did not hand over free copies of sensitive contracts. Instead, they offered tightly controlled, scheduled briefings.
That's familiar.
Very. They mandated that some of the most sensitive contracts could only be reviewed on-site, in a secure room under supervision. And crucially, they required GSIS lawyers to sign incredibly strict confidentiality agreements, NDAs, before they were allowed to lay eyes on a single page.
They built a fortress of red tape. They argued that in a deregulating power market, you can't just photocopy commercially sensitive pricing formulas and let an aggressive rival take them home to study.
Yes, and if we look at the mechanics of their defense, they leaned heavily on procedure, jurisdiction, and extreme confidentiality to manage the risk of a hostile shareholder.
And how did that all play out?
Well, this all culminated in a spectacular climax during a grueling 12-hour shareholder meeting at the Meralco Theater.
12 hours.
12 hours. And right in the middle of this chaotic marathon meeting, the Securities and Exchange Commission issued a cease and desist order to stop the election of directors and let the SEC directly supervise the proxy votes.
And the Lopezes didn't back down.
Not even an inch.
The acting corporate secretary, Anthony Rosette, stood on the stage, physically read the SEC order to the crowd, and with the full backing of the Lopez-dominated board, boldly declared the government order null and void.
Which is an incredibly gutsy move.
They just pushed through, counted their proxies, and successfully kept control of the board.
It was an absolute masterclass in defensive corporate warfare. In 2008, the Lopez family utilized process, jurisdictional arguments, and extreme confidentiality as an impenetrable shield against a hostile outsider who was demanding transparency.
It's like the family built a fortress so strong, so legally perfect, to keep enemies out in 2008, that in 2026 they are suddenly trapped inside it, using the automated defense systems on each other.
It's Shakespearean, really.
The irony is just staggering. In 2008, an outsider demands to see sensitive contracts, and the Lopezes say, no, you have to sign an NDA and attend a control briefing. In 2026, the insider cousins demand to see sensitive contracts, and Peaky says, no, you have to sign an NDA and accept a controlled briefing.
It is the exact same corporate reflex, but turned entirely inward. I mean, in 2008, the risk they were managing was a politically motivated takeover from the state pension fund.
Right.
Today, the risk Peaky claims to be managing is insider trading liability from the SEC, but the mechanism of control restricting the flow of information to protect the core is identical.
But if the old playbook, the one that literally saved their empire in 2008, is now the exact thing tearing them apart in 2026, what is the new playbook?
That's the million-dollar question.
How does a legacy family conglomerate survive its own evolution? Because clearly, relying on the old unspoken rules of just trust your cousin isn't working when there's 200 billion pesos and potential SEC jail time on the line.
And this brings us to the most vital insight of the Rappler report, and I think the ultimate lesson for anyone analyzing corporate structures.
Let's hear it.
The core issue isn't that one cousin is inherently right or wrong in their demands. The issue is structural lag.
Structural lag, meaning what?
The Lopez Group modernized its physical energy portfolio, moving from legacy gas plants to incredibly complex hydro batteries and advanced geothermal facilities infinitely faster than it modernized its internal family governance structure.
Okay, that makes sense. The source explains that the old structure was a classic post-Marcos era setup. You have a private holding company at the very top, pooling the family capital.
Right, the mothership.
Then you have a public big tent company in the middle, like Lopez Holdings. And then the actual operating companies at the bottom doing the actual work, like First Gen or ABS-CBN.
And that legacy structure relied heavily on informal communication. It relied on the assumption that the patriarchs at the top could fluidly move information down, and the operators at the bottom could safely filter information up without tripping over regulatory wires.
Because the regulations used to be looser.
Exactly. But in an era of hyper-strict securities laws and massive, highly scrutinized partnerships with global tycoons like Enrique Razon, that informal, blurry zone between private family business and public market reality becomes a massive liability.
So how do you actually fix it? I mean, the source text outlines concrete solutions that other modern family-controlled listed conglomerates use to solve this exact dilemma. What is the missing rulebook here?
Well, there are two fundamental mechanisms that modern conglomerates implement to bridge this gap. The first is formally defining true insiders at the family holding level.
Okay, let's translate the legalese here. What does that actually mean in practice for the cousins sitting around the table?
It means eliminating the ambiguity. Instead of treating every cousin on the family board as a potential dangerous tip-B who might accidentally trade stock, the corporation officially designates the directors of the family holding company as regulatory insiders.
Legally speaking.
Yes, they legally bring them inside the den.
But wait, doesn't that just expose them to the exact insider trading risk we talked about earlier, like the SEC algorithms?
It does, but it manages the risk through legal contracts called wall-crossing agreements.
Wall-crossing agreements, okay.
It's a formal trade-off. The company essentially says to the cousins, you want the inside knowledge, fine, we will bring you over the wall. But the second you hear the secret, your personal stock portfolios are frozen.
Oh.
You cannot buy or sell a single share until this news is made public. By signing this, they accept automatic, legally binding trading blackouts on their personal shares.
Oh, that is brilliant. You trade your right to buy and sell stock in the short term for your right to know what the hell is happening to your family's legacy.
Precisely.
It takes all the guesswork out of it. You sacrifice liquidity for access. Okay, so what's the second mechanism?
The second mechanism is writing transformational protocols. This means establishing mandatory, mathematically defined, step-by-step briefing milestones for the family board.
So no more sliding a 200 billion peso pivot under other matters on the agenda with a 1-hour time limit.
Exactly the opposite. The family writes a binding protocol. If any listed subsidiary is negotiating a deal that exceeds, say, 10 billion pesos or fundamentally alters the strategic direction of the company, the family board must be briefed at specific stages.
A mandated process.
Right. Stage 1, before signing a preliminary term sheet. Stage 2, before final subsidiary board approval. Stage 3, right before public disclosure. The briefings start high level and get more detailed, but they are not optional. They are a mandatory rhythm of governance.
Let's do some speculative alternative history here based on the text.
Okay, I like that.
If Lopez Inc. had these two protocols in place, wall-crossing agreements and transformational briefing milestones, does this massive court battle still happen?
Honestly, it is highly probable that the legal warfare would have been entirely avoided.
Really?
Yeah. If those protocols existed, Peaky's deal team would have formally crossed the family directors over the wall months before the Razon deal was finalized.
The NDAs and the blackouts would have been standard.
The blackouts would have started immediately, protecting everyone from the SEC. The family would have debated the merits of pumped storage hydro versus geothermal expansion in private, with full access to the financial models.
Now, they might have still vehemently disagreed. Gabby's camp might still have hated the idea of selling 60% of the gas plants.
Sure, business strategy is always up for debate.
They might have voted against it. But the fundamental grievance, that deep feeling of being blindsided, disrespected, and treated like an outsider to their own wealth, would be gone.
Exactly. There would be a clear, undeniable paper trail showing that the process respected both their stature as family owners and the rigid laws of the public market.
Instead of a messy 5-2 vote followed by injunctions and restraining orders, you would have a functional, albeit possibly contentious, corporate decision.
The conflict would remain focused on business strategy rather than devolving into an emotional dispute over secrecy and trust.
Think about your own workplace or your own family dynamic for everyone listening right now. How often do we rely on unspoken rules just because we share a history?
All the time.
We assume everyone is on the same page because we grew up together or we've worked together for a decade. But then the stakes get high. Maybe not 100 billion peso high, but high for you.
Yeah.
And those unspoken rules completely fall apart. They evaporate the moment actual pressure is applied.
It is a universal organizational vulnerability. Trust is essential, obviously, but trust without a formal framework is incredibly fragile.
Very fragile.
As any organization scales, whether it's a legacy family business expanding into new markets or a startup hiring its 50th employee in formal communication, must inevitably be replaced by formalized, transparent processes.
Let's pull all of this together because the ground we've covered today is massive.
It's been quite the journey.
We started with a seemingly simple, localized dispute. A 2 billion peso ask to help ABS-CBN, which resulted in a dramatic 5-2 vote to oust Gabby Lopez from the family holding company.
But as we peeled back the layers, we discovered that the vote was merely the rupture point of a much larger seismic shift.
Right.
We uncovered a multi-year, 200 billion peso strategic pivot involving the sale of foundational gas assets, massive investments in cutting-edge mountain water batteries, and the costly rejuvenation of legacy geothermal fields.
And we saw how that incredibly complex financial pivot slammed face first into the dual responsibilities of Gabby Lopez, wearing the hat of a public company's CEO, terrified of insider trading laws, and the hat of a family president expected to share everything.
The two hats dilemma.
We even saw the profound historical irony of the Lopez family using the exact same playbook of secrecy and red tape against each other that they successfully used to fend off a hostile government takeover in 2008.
And ultimately, we learned that while the Lopezes are a prominent, historically significant tycoon family, the core tension they are experiencing is universally applicable.
It applies to anyone running a growing team.
Managing communication, balancing trust with regulatory risk, and updating governance structures as an organization scales, these are the fundamental challenges of modern leadership.
The Lopez family is currently spending over 100 billion pesos to transition their massive physical hardware from fossil fuels to clean, renewable energy. But as we've seen today in this boardroom brawl, upgrading your physical hardware is completely useless if you don't simultaneously upgrade your corporate software.
That's the real lesson here.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over. In your own life, in your own family, or in your own organization, are you relying on an outdated operating system of trust to manage the massive, complex risks of tomorrow?